Excellent. Chris, Sebastian, if you're happy, I'll begin.
Yeah,
Yep.
sounds good.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and thanks for joining us on what is another particularly warm day across most of Europe. So it's very much appreciated. This webinar is the third in the series organised as part of the EMBRACE project, which is a Horizon Europe initiative working to strengthen Europe's preparedness and response to biological and toxin-related threats. The project's bringing together a consortium of research institutions, operational agencies, innovation partners to improve how Europe can detect, assess, and respond to emerging biotoxin risks. An essential element of the project is its aim to connect expertise, knowledge, and operational practice across the biotoxin community. Through EMBRACE, it seeks to support practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and other stakeholders by improving access to trusted information, strengthening collaboration, and helping translate scientific knowledge into operational capability. So within this setup is the European Biotoxin Task Force, or the BTF, as you may often hear us call it, who are the hosts of this series. The BTF's brought together a small group of independent experts with deep experience across areas such as toxicology, public health, environmental monitoring, crisis management, and civil protection. And it's got a threefold purpose. Firstly, to improve rapid, informed support during emerging biotoxin crises. Secondly, to contribute to strategic preparedness guidance. And thirdly, to offer professional advice to the EMBRACE Biotoxin team. And today's webinar is part of that broader effort to foster dialogue, share insight, and strengthen communication across European biotoxin communities. And we're grateful to be able to run it in the environment of CMIND's clustering initiative designed to amplify networking across projects with an interest in CBRN matters. So the final little bit from me is this session will run as an informal chat between our colleague Chris Singer and his expert guest today, Sebastian Simonsen, for about 30 minutes. We'll then turn the debate over to you in the audience to hear any observations or questions that you've got. If you've got any questions during the webinar, please do just put them in the chat and we will come back to them, or Chris or Sebastian will jump onto them when it's appropriate. And the webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to access it after. I think that's enough from me, Chris. No one's here to listen to me, really. So I'm going to hand over to you and Sebastian to get us underway.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. Useful introduction. And folks, it's a great pleasure to introduce Sebastian to you. He's a project manager at Prometech with considerable expertise in cross-border disaster management and CBRN emergency response technology. He has an extensive background in civil protection technologies and considerable involvement with Horizon projects. The subject of the webinar today is the technological approach needed for effective CBRN sampling. And as Ben said, Sebastian's going to run through some bits and then we will have the opportunity for questions at the end. So Sebastian, over to yourself straight away.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ben, for the introductions and for the invitation to give a presentation. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen if you let me, Ben. Sorry. Thank you.
It's all yours.
Yeah. Yes, so as I'm sure you are familiar with, as you registered for this presentation in this webinar, this is the focus on the CBRN sample tracking research that's been conducted by the EMBRACE project. And so as I was introduced, I'm Sebastian Simonsen, and I'm working for a company called Prometech. Now, we're part of the EMBRACE consortium, but this is the main focuses, the 4 domains that we focus on: the technology side in dispersion and airflow modeling, casualty sample tracking systems, and that's the focus of today's conversation, is the sample tracking side. Also doing PPE modeling, so we have experience for the protection factor on CBRN side of PPE, but then also on the ballistic PPE modeling. And then using technologies to make or enhance training and simulation systems. So this is the main focus of Prometech, and we'll be focusing on the sample tracking, obviously. So as we approach this, how to conduct this research and also to achieve what EMBRACE required or set out to achieve, we were looking at what the CBRN incident is and specifically the forensics and the sample tracking that happens during and post a CBRN incident. And so, there's so many different parties involved. It's a very large multi-stakeholder event whenever this happens. So there's inherent challenge in this, and so creating some type of traceability of all elements of one of these events, but we're focusing on the samples themselves. So being able to trace from the exact moment a sample is taken to all the subsequent processes that follow that, the life of that sample, so to speak. And we looked at what's currently the status quo, and often it's some type of paper-based system that might get digitized at some point in the flow or the life of the sample, but often starts off paper-based, and it does work, of course, but there are some downsides to that. And so we looked into how to improve that system. And if we are creating a digital solution, how does it meet the base requirements that are currently already expected and met by the tradition, as I state here. And then, thankfully enough, in 2024, the CEN 18053 was published, and it provides quite extensive standard on how to or what's required for digital tracking of CBRN samples. So I'll just go through, and I'm using this diagram which comes from 18053 standard, and this diagram does I think a decent job of showing the complexity and what the standard itself covers, and therefore what our system was following the standard implements. So on the left-hand side, there's the reconnaissance team, sampling team, and carrier team, and this all happens mostly at the actual incident scene, and that's where the samples are actually taken and recorded and packaged and prepared to go to laboratories for analysis. And you'll see that there are these CTPs, which CTP is short for custody transfer point, because a very strong focus of the needs and the requirements that for legal purposes, for scientific purposes, within a sampling life cycle and legitimacy, is that custody can be validated, and that the custody of the specific sample has not been or is true and has not been tampered with, because that, of course, would invalidate any results from the analysis. And so you can see in this diagram the custody transfer points appear in many locations, and it can be between from the incident scene and to laboratories. It can be after laboratories and be put into storage. It's just anytime the custody, like in the legal sense, changes hands, and that this is an important moment that must be recorded and kept on, made a record of. Yeah. So as I said, this standard came out in 2024, which is right at I think it was actually published just before the beginning of the EMBRACE project. So the timing was quite fortuitous. And as you can see, the main goals from this standard are to be able to protect the evidence integrity, ensure that the traceability of the evidence itself is recorded, and all in the goal to support the legal and operational accountability. So everything is considered valid. Yeah, and so our main takeaway from looking at this standard and looking at the our understanding of from the research of how these incidents operate in terms of the forensic sampling side of things is, yeah, in CBRN operations, the integrity of evidence is only as strong as the integrity of the custody process. So as soon as the custody process is deemed to be even perceived as faulty or incomplete, then that can destabilize the integrity of all of the evidence. Now, Prometech has been working in the Horizon and previous funding mechanism projects for, well, now 17 years. And one of those projects was toxitriage, and it went from 2015 to 2019. And the original research that was conducted was on this tag and trace casualty and sample tracking system, and it has been expanded upon under the EMBRACE project. And so we took the lessons learned from toxitriage and that system and have moved them and upgraded this next system from this original experience. Looking at the market for these types of systems, just in the general broader sense, there's these, for technical systems, there's laboratory information management systems, there's some military or defense logistic tracking systems, there's hazardous material tracking systems, there's also individual chain of custody solutions, which is where I say this is where our a solution falls within. It's in the experimental phase. We're in a research project. We're progressing with that. And then, of course, there's paper-based or Excel or some type of hybrid system. And then on a non-CBRN side, there is the digital evidence management systems. And so there's not currently right now a solution on the market that does that adheres to kind of what all of these systems are able to provide. And so that's why we see that there's a research potential and potential after the research for our solution to fulfill these needs, to be able to upgrade and potentially replace a paper-based system and integrate with laboratory information systems or a hazardous material tracking system, because they all have their strong points and their points that are lacking. But for the purposes of being able to show serious chain of custody of the CBRN sample, there's not really any product on the market. Of course, there could be custom solutions that individual organizations or countries have already created or procured, but unknown from our research. So then I would like to go into how the sample tracking system that we have created, or we're still in the process of creating, as the project is only just past the halfway point of its life, and how we have implement this CEN 18053. So the point that I'm highlighting here is more at the incident scene. So there's the mission command team, reconnaissance sampling.
Ich hoffe, dir geht es gut.
And
Ich habe heute Morgen eine E-Mail vorformuliert, diese Frau.
So the sampling team and the carrier team. And at this space, this is where the sample is initially taken and created. So there's just an example of a sample here being just here. This is a little container. But then what our system does is it takes NFC sticker, it takes a QR code, it could take both, and applies a digital identification number to this, ID to this, which of course is also registered in our system. And then the user has the ability to add all the parameters of what that sample is, so wipe, air, solid, liquid, etc., and more data about this coming from the user. And they're also able to see the other samples that are coming from this incident. So they are able to understand, oh, okay, this has been sampled, this has been sampled. And there's metadata tracked of these samples. So the location, the time, the user that interacted with the sample, all of this is also recorded for of course, legality of it all, and then also just for the purposes of having the data for proof that's relevant. So that, like I said, focuses on the initial side of things. And for this, for the research side of things on experimenting of what's the best way a user or users should be inputting this, it really it will be interesting when we get to the demonstrations and the field trials for EMBRACE on the feedback from the end users for if there's a lot of information that needs to be recorded about a sample, how possible is that to do when wearing a very heavy PPE? I imagine it to be quite difficult even if you're using a stylus or something like this. So we're looking into audio-based input methods. So you're able to speak, and what you speak becomes recorded and becomes parsed or broken up into actual real data points instead of just what was said. Of course, both will be kept. So there can always be a process of going back and validating, oh, this was misunderstood or this was misattributed. So you can always manually change it. So that's one method, being able to do a microphone recorded type of input. Another being that the sample information, the very basics could be done in the hot zone. And then when the sample is then removed from the hot zone, taken to the cold zone, more detailed information can be applied to that same record, saying, okay, so yes, it was taken at this location, at this time, it was this type of sample, but then here's all the specific parameters of the volume or the material or these types of specific things. So being able to edit or contribute to a sample record after the fact. Obviously, it should not be too long after the fact, but these are the types of issue, or not issues, but experiments and feedback we're looking to have answered for this section of the application. So let's see. So then the sample types, as you saw, wipe, air, solid, liquid, that these are generic, but of course, and you can see the kind of more generic sample type methods, they're commonly used and widely accepted, of course, but we also are integrating with Bioxhale's breath draw system, which it looks like this, but that same device can also be used to take ambient air samples or a white powder sample as well. And so within the EMBRACE project, this device is already recognized by our system. So some of the data can be pre-filled out for the user because it's understood precisely what device is taking the sample. So then the system already helps the user who's taking the sample as well. So it can be, like I said, on generic style samples, or it's also possible to have specific tailored types of data forms for a specific sampling device. Now, there's also field analysis that is possible, of course. And this field analysis, at least within the EMBRACE project, is being brought by AirSense Analytics and Myon. And the idea with our system is that you can take a sample and then be able to already give potential parameters that the device itself requires or wants about what it is sampling, and then receive the results of the analysis. And so then there's a unified application and dashboard that is able to not only track, okay, so the sample itself is now at the stage of a field analysis based upon this device that it's being processed by or analyzed by, but also the result of that is then accessible to the field commander or somebody who it's relevant for, a user of the system. So it shortens the communication a bit. And so I hope you can understand that the QR code and NFC is just an identification. So it gets registered, and then the registered sample is scanned via NFC or something similar by the AirSense device or by the Myon device. And it feeds some data to the device itself to say, this is the sample type. And then when the analysis is over, the device then immediately shares to the application servers. Yeah. So the other or another aspect that we, in order to adhere to the standard, our application is able to create what we call collections. And these collections are a singular or a group of samples that are locked down in some capacity. So that's both digitally and physically locked down. Of course, our system can only partially validate the physical security of the collection itself, but it would start at this point where the carrier team then bundles the samples and puts them into some type of container to be able to seal them and get them prepared for a transfer, a custody transfer point, a custody transfer, and hand them off to somebody else. So you can create a sample by, create a collection by taking the samples and through the NFC tag, manually say, okay, this one is going into this collection, and it has to be done not on bulk. It has to be done individually to validate that the actual sample is in the collection itself. And then you seal a collection by scanning it with a tag. And so as you can see on the right-hand side, you also are mandated to take a photo of the sealed collection to create further evidence that the process was followed and that it was sealed. And this yellow tag here is an NFC tag with a zip tie. So a zip tie, of course, is not the most secure, but it's secure. And so it's just demonstrating that there are already products out there that are secure devices that have NFC tag integration. And of course, QR codes can be printed on them as well. So QR codes could work as well. And so now focusing on the transfer mapping. So these custody transfer points are identified at many places between the carrier teams and laboratories often. That's how it's defined in the standard. And so how our system handles that is by having two phones but it doesn't necessarily have to be phones, but it's phones that are initiating. So the one phone is held or used by a user who technically has custody of a collection, and they initiate a handoff with an approved entity, a user, and the other user then has to initiate on their application a reception. And at this point, then the two phones are recording their locations and also are triggering this QR code generation to then make sure that when the user who is currently in custody gives custody over, they're in close proximity to one another. And there's also a photo taking mechanism as well to prove that custody was transferred in real time and space, both through geolocation recording, the QR code method, and through photo method. And then the custody transfer at that point is saved in our system, and that collection is then under the custody of the new custodian. Now I'm coming to the close of the presentation and the general research that was done, and I wanted to just show that there's a kind of a complex, semi-complex connection between all of the different devices within EMBRACE or systems within EMBRACE and our forensics application, the sample tracking application. And so especially this ability to be able to have samples, and technically the samples can also be broken down into aliquots, so you can have subsamples, and this is a technically indefinite technical application, but it allows for laboratories or these types of people to be able to do what they need to do to the sample, and it still all be registered and tracked within our system. And then, of course, there's analyses which are tagged to either an aliquot or a sample, and package is a collection and whatnot. So then the first demonstration for this system within the EMBRACE project will happen at the FTX1, so the first one that EMBRACE will be hosting and conducting. And I just wanted to give a kind of a breakdown of our focus in this research between the hot zone, warm zone, and cold zone. In the hot zone, it's really wanting to understand from the people who are using the system, responsible for taking the samples, responsible for handling the samples in the hot zone and towards the warm zone, their thoughts on their input methods that are available to them, both with the PPE, without the PPE, all of this. How does the phone-based system compare to their normal methodology, and what improvements can be made to more appropriately and better serve them? And then, of course, the Bioxhale's breath draw / general air sampling and white powder sampling devices, using those specific sampling devices also in conjunction with our system, and how this type of pre-filled information or how that all is applicable and useful to the users. Then in the warm zone, it's really about the sample decontamination, where, of course, confident that the NFC tags and the QR codes will survive decontamination, but of course, having some type of validation of this would be useful. And then in the cold zone, there's some more different aspects. So the sampling analysis, the on-site sampling, on-site analysis machines by Myon and by AirSense are available in the cold zone to be used. And so how the users interact with their systems and then our systems, and does it improve the experience overall, and is it useful and intuitive? And then, of course, the results and making sure that it does all of that work, and do the results coming into the dashboard or the application actually have a beneficial effect on the incident scene and the management of that incident scene. The preparation for custody transfer, so creating a collection and going through that process, that also needs to be validated there. And then briefly mentioned the incident commander, the people monitoring the status of the situation at a higher level. Is there a benefit to new samples being registered and understanding more about when an analysis result comes back, or if a custody transfer is triggered, is this useful in the way that the information is provided? So that wraps up my presentation of the forensic sample tracking, or CBRN sample tracking system that Prometech has been developing within EMBRACE, and the research that we've been conducting. This QR code goes to the EMBRACE website, I believe, and I would like to thank you all for this.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sebastian. I think we can all agree as well that the move on from the traditional approaches, which were always accompanied by challenges in their own right, into the technical world is very welcome to see. I'm going to throw it open now, folks, to questions. I do have a couple of questions myself, but I'm going to throw it open to others for questions. You can either pop them in the chat or speak up with your microphones open if you wish to.
Sebastian, it's Paul. The real power of this is its ability to adapt as circumstances change with the sample. So it may be that a sample goes to a laboratory and the laboratory has a problem, and then it needs to go to another laboratory, or some non-compliant, out of scope issue occurs, but the sample is still valuable, and you want to keep your eyes on it and know exactly how you do it. So do you envisage that anyone with a mobile phone can log into this? So you don't have to be part of a
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not completely scoped out in terms of how we would solve this technically, but from the beginning we did think and assume that it would be not very productive of us to say that every single entity within the chain needs to be a paying user of our system, because there are so many steps and individual organizations, companies, public institutions, potentially even governments, that would need to be able to receive or hand off this. So we already do know that there is some way or some method in which we need to be able to have the same level of legitimacy in the custody transfer, but still make it open enough that a laboratory or some type of approved entity can receive and share or pass on the collections without being a customer of this system, basically.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sebastian. Sufyan, I believe you've got a question.
I'm in the microphone. You hear me?
Yes.
Do
yes.
indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sebastian, thank you very much for your kind presentation. It's very, very good. But I have a question for the emergency cases. You mentioned the first scene. You think it is cannot be possible to have the first laboratory with them in the accident, like to test the blood type and sugar or something like that, and then we can talk about the patient have been in the hospital also. So it can go together with them, or because the patient cannot stay when accident there. I mean, Shall we think in this way also, or I am wrong? I am misunderstanding something. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for the question. I believe I only could hear probably 80% of that question, but if I understood it correctly, you were speaking about when there is some type of high intensity incident that happens, CBRN or not CBRN, but most likely CBRN in this case, the casualties themselves cannot remain at the incident scene, and so therefore that evidence that they hold within themselves or on themselves might be transported off incident scene to a hospital or these types of things. Is that the summary of your question?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, yes, that is a good, not edge case, but pretty normal situation that we would have to account for. And I think that, well, okay, so in parallel to this, within the EMBRACE project, we also have a casualty tracking system, which foundationally is the same or similar to what I've just presented to you. And in fact, casualties or samples can come from casualties within the system, and they're already inherently linked. So through that system, the casualty tracking system, the paramedics, the hospital staff would also be able to register that there are samples coming from this casualty as well. So technically, they're not at the incident scene, but it would be known that sample, no matter where it was taken, using our casualty tracking system, the sample itself came from that casualty itself. So that's how I see that solution or that problem being solved.
Does that answer your question, Safin?
Oh.
We've lost him. I think his signal was dropping in and out, and I think he's dropped out entirely.
Okay, so yeah, Sebastian, I think from what you're saying there, the system itself is capable of handling multiple scenes, whether that be a human scene or the physical scene of the incident, and the sample tracking can come from that, regardless of where they are. So,
Yep.
okay. Any other questions from anyone else? Okay, I have one if I may.
Yes.
You talked about it coming up to the laboratory stage and then the aliquot if you need to break a sample down into many. To what extent do you envisage the laboratory being able to record what steps they're taking in terms of sample analysis on the system itself, or would they be relying on their historical means of recording? I've had experience in the past where laboratory steps have either not been adequately recorded or have led to the degradation of samples and such like, which then has caused problems in the chain of custody at a later stage. So do you see this coming into sort of the scientific side where the laboratory are undertaking and can record what steps they're taking?
Yeah, I think that sounds very interesting for our system to be able to allow for some type of, I mean, hopefully it would be through an integration from their laboratory management system and just be able to directly dump from there saying, here, this is what we did to this sample, and be able to track that with the sample itself through our system. But it might, of course, due to many reasons, it might end up being a manual thing. But these types of records, I think, are very important, and that our system should be able to have a way that laboratories are able to amend or append, a record with their own information.
Brilliant. Okay, superb. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that. Good. Well, I make it 10 minutes to go. Sorry, 5 minutes to go, Ben, unless there's any other final questions.
Doesn't seem to be. If you're happy, Chris, I'll sign us off and we'll give people back a bit of their time.
Superb. Sebastian, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really interesting. And I'm looking forward to the FTX and those of you who are coming along to the FTX as well to be able to see the effectiveness and testing the effectiveness. So that'll be really interesting to see.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much, Chris. And I look forward to the FTX as well, and really being able to get the feedback from the end users and see our systems running.
Brilliant.
Excellent, great. I'll just close us off then. A huge thank you, Chris and Sebastian. There's some really good insight there. So just a little bit of a plug. This has been the third micro webinar in the series, and the next one will be scheduled for September. I know, Paul, Chris has got his eyes on you, so I'd run away if you don't want to be a part of it. We will follow up with an email including advice on how to become a part of the Biotoxin Task Force, and we will send the videos of the last 3 sessions out as well. It'll be a chance for you to give us your feedback and let us know what you want to hear about next. Finally, in the chat and on the screen is the links to all of EMBRACE project media channels. So please do have a look and sign up to the newsletter. And if Chris and Sebastian are happy, with no further ado, we will bring the session to an end. And I wish you all the rest of your sunny afternoon.
Yes. Yes, thank you all so much.
Cheers all.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.